Please explain intrinsic and extrinsic illusions and how we are caught in both. Okay, so this idea of illusion in general. An illusion is when we don't see things as they are. That's an illusion. The illusion theory is talking about the way that we experience our own consciousness. So in this theory, there are two illusions functioning, the intrinsic and the extrinsic illusions. So where does this come from? The description that I'm going to go through has been presented by Swami Ramatirtha and Swami Parthasarathi. So it may have come from places earlier than that. That's as early as I can find it. And before we get into that, let's just look at these two words, intrinsic and extrinsic. Okay, so stay with these definitions. There's an example coming which hopefully makes it easier to understand. An intrinsic property of an object is one that belongs to the object itself. An extrinsic property of an object is one that depends on its relationship with other things. Okay, what's an example? You have a steel ball, a green steel ball as it happens. Now, it has 100 kilograms of steel. That's its mass. Now, on Earth, if you want to figure out how much mass it's got, you say, well, it's got 100 kilograms, using whichever method you use. Go to the moon. How much mass does it have? It still has 100 kilograms. That's the amount of stuff it has. Anywhere it goes in the universe, whether it's got something on top of it or underneath it, whether it's connected to other objects, the mass of that ball is intrinsic to itself. There's 100 kilograms, irrespective of anything else. It's independent. But weight is something different. Weight is the amount of force that it exerts. So you take that 100 kilogram ball and it exerts 980 newtons of force down on Earth. Take that same ball to the moon and it exerts a mere 163 newtons. So weight is an extrinsic property. It depends upon where the ball is placed as to how much weight it has. Keep these ideas of intrinsic and extrinsic in mind as we go through here. And let's have a look at what we're talking about. The intrinsic illusion exists because of the object itself. It's inherent in the object. Simple analogy or a simple example of this is a ghost on a post. So you are out at night time, there's a lamp post, and as you're walking towards it, you see a ghostly apparition standing right in front of it. The image, in this case, is the ghost, the thing that has been projected. The real object is the post. Now, in this example, the image and the object cannot coexist. What does that mean? While you are seeing the ghost, you're not seeing the post. As you get a little bit closer, you shift your angle and you see the post. As a consequence, the ghost disappears. So in your mind, in your visual field, in your experience, the ghost and the post don't coexist. It's a little bit like the illusory drawing that you've probably seen. I think it's called My Wife and My Mother-in-Law, or something like this. When you look at the picture, do you see a young woman or an old woman? You might look at it and see it switching between the two. But again, what this is trying to demonstrate is that you see one or the other. So this is an intrinsic illusion. There's a real object, but you're misperceiving it, and you see it as something else. And you don't see the object as it is. Second is an extrinsic illusion. The image that appears depends upon the environment. Okay, what does that mean? Take the example of standing before a mirror. In this case, the image is your reflection. The object that it's an image of is your body. And in an extrinsic illusion, there is a medium which permits that image to arise. And here you've got the image, the object, and the medium all coexisting. So you could imagine, for example, if the mirror was curved inward, then your body to you appears tall and slim. If it was curved outwards, your body appears to you much wider. So the image depends upon, in this case, the mirror. It's an extrinsic illusion. So in our experience of consciousness, our conditioned individual consciousness, both illusions are operating. So the rope snake example is very famous, very old, meaning thousands of years. Very simple example. A young boy runs across his backyard and sees a snake there. Runs inside and says, "Mum, Dad, there's a snake outside." The parents look at each other and they know, we just bought a rope and placed it by the tree. What does the snake look like? Oh, it's coiled up by the tree. It looks like it's about maybe 6 feet long. It's sort of a pale brown colour. Okay, so this is a pretty simple story, pretty simple narrative. So you've got here both an intrinsic illusion and an extrinsic illusion. How is that the case? Okay, let's first look for the intrinsic illusion. In an intrinsic illusion, you either see the real object or the illusory image. So the real object obviously is the rope. The image is the snake. The boy doesn't see the rope. If you were to ask him, "Did you see a rope?" he would say, "No, I did not." Now, you happen to know he in fact did see a rope, but from his perspective, he saw no rope, only a snake. When he gets taken outside and the light gets turned on, the snake disappears and he sees only the rope. So this is a pretty simple example of the intrinsic illusion. Now, how does the extrinsic illusion come in here? That illusory snake that is set up in the boy's mind now acts as a medium. Just as we had a mirror in the earlier example, there is a snake as the thought in his mind. The illusory snake that has been set up in his consciousness acts as a medium. A medium for what? The object to be reflected as an image. So what's the image that the boy is seeing? Well, the properties of the snake. It's light brown, it's coiled up, it's approximately 6 feet long. These are the properties of the snake. Those properties are a reflection of the properties of the rope. The rope is pale brown, 6 feet long, and coiled up. But where does he see them? He sees those properties as the snake's properties. Pretty easy to understand if you travel carefully with the thoughts. That the first thing that happens is that an illusory snake is set up in the person's mind, and then whatever the properties of the rope are, they are projected onto that illusory snake and seen as the specific individual snake that the boy is experiencing. So in a similar way, you have a specific individual consciousness that you are experiencing. It has arisen because of these two illusions. Okay, let's try and figure out how the illusions track. So tracking the analogy, which means taking the parts of the analogy and tracking them onto our experience. So the intrinsic illusion. in the example, the real object is the rope. And the image is the illusory snake. That's the intrinsic illusion, the belief there is a snake. So how does that track onto our experiences or our individual consciousness? This is one of the axioms of Vedanta philosophy. There is a fundamental reality. And that fundamental reality is your non-dual self. Now, is that how you experience your consciousness? No, of course not. You never experience yourself as non-dual. There's always an individual self. And what comes with an individual self? Duality. There's me, and there is everything else. The world of my experience. Same thing happens in the dream state. When you're in the dream state, there are two things. There is you, the dreaming subject, and the dream world, full of all of its objects and so forth. Even when you go within your own personality and start to observe your emotions and your thoughts, you are now in relationship to your thoughts and emotions. You are the subject looking at the object of your own thoughts. So, in this case, you only see a dualistic consciousness. You don't see a non-dualistic consciousness. Just as the boy doesn't see a rope, he sees a snake. So that moves us on to the extrinsic illusion. Now that you've got this individual self set up, it operates as a medium. So let's go back to the example. The boy sets up an illusory snake that operates as a medium which allows the properties of the rope to be projected onto it, giving the illusory snake with all of its properties, qualities, and so forth. So you've set up an individual dualistic self, this subject-object split, that allows the properties of reality, whatever that means, to be projected into our individual consciousness, our individual self. And what's our individual consciousness made up of, if you like? What's its fabric? Space, time, and causation. So we experience the world of space, objects in relationship to each other, time, events in relationship to each other, and causation, a connection between two states or two agents that can influence each other. That is the fundamental fabric of everything that we experience. So how did they come about? Space, time, and causation. They entered into our awareness through this portal of the individual self. What is it that is reflected here? The properties of reality. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, that phrase is to us utterly obscured. What does it even mean to say the properties of reality? So if you look at the analogy, there is something that tracks. The brownness of the rope tracks onto the brownness of the snake. The 6 foot longness tracks onto the 6 foot longness of the snake. The problem is that what we're doing when we try to push into that reality is that we're using our intellects, which are themselves incapable of the task. And so we have to use words like all-pervading, eternal, infinite. It's really just borrowed terms from what we're observing here. All-pervading means not limited in terms of size. Eternal simply means not bound by time. And so too for causation. So what this is doing is to get a global picture of the conditioned consciousness that we are in. What am I experiencing right now? I'm experiencing an individual self floating through space-time and causation. What is that space-time causation? How did it get here? Well, you open the door and let it in. The door of individual self. And so the role of the spiritual path is to smash the mirror and kill the snake. So what does that mean? Smashing the mirror you can think of as dropping an identity defined in space, time and causation. As we are on the spiritual path, we are improving our personality. It is improving the illusory self. It has qualities, it has properties. You're making the extrinsic illusion better. But you are still in relationship to the objective world, even if you take that to its extreme. In the Vedanta treatise, he has a quote, something along the lines of, "Be it said to the credit of prevailing religions is that they have removed the extrinsic illusion." What does that mean? It means that if you go far enough in predominant religions, you can get to a point where you no longer have an identity that is defined by the things that change in space, time and causation. There is a sense of sameness. There is a sense of unity in which the sum total of everything you are experiencing is seen, if you like, as a single substance. And you'll find that you are now in relationship to consciousness. It can't affect you, but you are still in relationship to it. There is still a dualistic notion. I experience nothing but the supreme consciousness. All of this is consciousness and consciousness alone. I cannot hate anything I see because of such and such. Beautiful idea, but it can go further, because that notion that there is a subject-object split is still there. I am an individual self, experiencing nothing but the devotion. Subject-object split. Killing the snake means killing that illusory snake, getting rid of that notion that I am an individual self. Now the methods for these I'm not going to go into here, but generally speaking that is the spiritual path. Except to say that the word dhyana in the Vedantic tradition, which is translated as meditation, is that final practice which gets us to dispel that false belief that there is an individual self. The light gets turned on and you see the individual self for what it is. The non-dual self.